Hello, and welcome to the Afterlife. I'm Dre.
And I'm Luke.
Last month, we had the pleasure of interviewing Kennedy Hall. She's a talented musical artist and songwriter, as well as just a really awesome person.
We hope you enjoy this just as much as we did. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
And as always,
We'll see you on the other side.
so Kennedy, for you, like a little bit of background, what do you do? Like, I know like you're in music, but what do you do like as far as music and like career?
Yeah, so I went to school for biology and psychology, so I'm a scientist research by trade, but I haven't worked in the field for 2 years. I quit to kind of take some time to work on music because it's really been like my passion project my whole life. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I've been doing for the last couple years, kind of just trying to like finish a lot of my songs and put them out there. So I actually just had my
Awesome.
first two shows this past couple of weeks, so it's been a really exciting time for me.
Awesome. That's cool.
Yeah. So
And
yeah, so just working on music. Yeah.
okay, great. That's really cool. Like, Luke and I, we're both musicians, so we 100%
Sweet.
relate to that. Growing up, we had bands together. Like, it's kind of funny. He's the same band members, just he and I, but we kept rebranding the band names. So,
Nice. Do you guys still play music together?
you know, we live on opposite sides of the country now. You know, he's in
Oh,
Ohio. I'm in California. But yeah, we still kind of collaborate a little bit. Working on more collaborations.
sweet.
So awesome. Well, I know Luke mentioned that you had some paranormal experiences. So do you want to share those with us?
Yeah, so the paranormal is something that I've just always been really interested in, like for
Hmm.
no reason. I guess it kind of
Hmm.
runs in my family a little bit, even though it was like kind of discouraged as a kid. I
Okay.
grew up in a pretty like religious household. My dad's Catholic. I come from a long line of Catholic people, and
Okay. Uh-huh.
I'm not religious. I stopped going to church in probably like high school, right around
Hmm.
the time when I got like my Ouija board. Like everybody has that one friend as a kid that always wanted to
Yeah.
play with the Ouija board. Like that was me.
Hmm.
So I'd had some just like small experiences using that where I don't know, maybe I'm just gullible and my friends were moving it, but everybody like
Hmm.
swore up and down like they would be such good actors if if they were
Yeah.
moving it and lying to me. So just like little stuff like that. And then I grew up in houses that I believe were haunted. My dad's house is kind of like it's a ranch up in
Hmm.
Cleveland, and it's just surrounded by like trees and
Hmm.
just a lot of like big windows and stuff. And I like you always feel like somebody is watching you in that house. Even like my friends would be reluctant to have like sleepovers and stuff like that because my house was creepy. So
Yeah.
but nothing, I never saw anything or anything like that, but I do know that the previous owner was close with my dad, passed away in that house, so we always would joke, that it
Hmm.
was them. And then at my mom's house, my parents were split up, so I spent half the time at my dad's house, half the time at my mom's house.
Oh, okay. Hmm.
And sh- she actually bought the house right like immediately after the previous owner had actually committed suicide in that house.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I the basement always felt really creepy, but like basements always
Hmm.
feel kind of creepy.
Yeah.
But she had this one experience where she lost her wedding rings for like a full 2 days. Couldn't find
Hmm.
them. She always puts them in the same spot every time
Hmm.
she takes them off, and then they just disappeared. And like her and my stepdad like tore the house apart looking for them, and they finally found them underneath like a toothbrush holder that had no like
Oh.
there
Uh-huh.
was no way for these rings to just like roll under there, but that's
Yeah.
where they found them. So
Wow.
that was definitely the creepiest thing that happened. I don't know. I think maybe she was the ghost was trying to like stir up drama in the relationship or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, that I don't know. My house has just kind of had like weird feelings to them. I always wanted to see a ghost, but I think if you want it too bad, sometimes it doesn't happen for you. So,
Right. Exactly.
yeah.
It's kind of like they're like, no, you want it too much. Yeah, we're not going to give you what you want.
Right. Or they would give it and it would be too scary. Like, I had sleep paralysis when I was a teenager, and
Okay.
I honestly, I never talk about this because it sounds insane, but when I was sleeping, when I was falling asleep, I just remember like kind of a dark like cloud kind of thing in my ceiling, and then
Okay.
I think I was, like falling asleep and my brain was doing whatever, but I would see like a really creepy face and it would really freak me out. Like I would really have trouble falling asleep, and I still do actually. I don't fall asleep until like 3 in the morning. I don't know. It's just, yeah, I don't know. So
Okay.
I've always had like little creepy things.
Yeah.
But so the big story that I wanted to share with you guys is something that happened actually in the 40s. So this is my dad's side of the family. They were the Gins. So this story is about my great uncle James Cleveland Ginn. And so he was a seaman in World War II.
Wow.
Yeah, so he had been in the army like pretty much since he got out of high school, it seems like, and eventually was sent onto, I think it's called the Merchant Marine, which is an oil tanker in the war. So they were somewhere in South America, I believe, and the Germans had these like submarines that would send out torpedoes and like hit some of these oil tankers that were just meant to like transport things. Like they weren't expecting to be like right in the middle of stuff. So yeah, let me just read this article to you guys
for sure.
you've got some time. This story was recounted in the Goldsboro newspaper. This is North Carolina, where my family's from.
Okay.
And this was told by my cousin Linda Lee Woodard. And if anybody's a UNC fan, you might know her as the lady who attended over 600 UNC basketball games in her lifetime.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she actually just passed away, but she was kind of like the keeper of all of my family's history, like our family trees, all our photos, everything like that.
That's cool.
She knew all those stories. I loved talking to her. So I kind of wonder where that stuff is now, but luckily she had an interview with a reporter and told the story. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool to have somebody in the family who like cares about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess let's start with kind of the structure of my family. So my dad is one of 4 kids, and then my dad's mom is one of I think 7 siblings. So like there's just a lot of people in my extended family.
Big family. Okay.
So James Cleveland Ginn was one of 7 siblings, and like it was a very close family. He's very close with his mother, and I guess my great grandma was kind of like the center of the household. And yeah, so okay, so let's start somewhere in here. I can also send these to you guys if you want to post these.
Oh yeah, definitely. That'd be cool.
Cool. So this is told from the perspective of my cousin Linda Lee, who would have been like a niece, I guess, to James Cleveland Ginn. So she says, in the spring of 1971, after I'd graduated from UNC and begun work in my first real job, I'd gone home to Rosewood in the first weekend in May. During the next week, I was surprised when Mama called and asked, "When are you coming in for the weekend?" I explained that I was working and thus would not be coming. Her passive silence spoke of unhappiness with this turn of events, but I put it down to some vague reluctance to cut the apron strings and thought no more of it. A couple years later, I accompanied Mama and her 2 older sisters, Frances and Thelma, to Ohio for the wedding of Aunt Evelyn, my grandma's daughter, Susan. Our flight was relatively uneventful, though only 14 of our 17 pieces of checked baggage arrived on time. Everyone seemed relieved that the dry ice pack of Wilbur's barbecue was one of the safe arrivals. I love that random detail. They love barbecue. They're southern. Aunt Thelma and I could manage without some clothing and toiletries till the next day. During the visit, we spent some time examining boxes and photographs of Aunt Evelyn's that accumulated. In one box, I stumbled across a packet of familiar pictures, apparently taken in Goldsboro sometime in the 40s, judging from the ages of my grandparents and their 7 children. "That's funny," I said. "We have these exact same pictures." Aunt Frances glanced across the table and replied, "Of course, we all do. That was the day Cleveland came home from the dead." Thus, I heard in a relatively complete fashion the details of events which had come to define much of the Ginn family history for years. Shortly before the U.S. entry into the war, Cleveland and his good friend Al Jarman had joined the Merchant Marine as able seamen. Their ship, the T.C. Macabre, was an oil tanker in late March of 1942 off the coast of South America, pursued for days by a German submarine. The ship's captain tried to outrun the enemy. The Macabre was not a military ship. It was unarmed. The submarine got within firing range, and the Macabre was torpedoed repeatedly and began to sink. Cleveland managed to cling to an overturned lifeboat in the sea of burning oil all night long, calling out in agony for his mama. Granny, who had been known to have a strange and mystical connection with loved ones, had been ironing a lace tablecloth when she heard Cleveland calling out for her. She dropped to her knees and prayed for his safety. Again, ironing, she heard him. Again, she dropped down and prayed. This went on for a long time. The story goes that she never did finish that tablecloth that day. The next morning, Cleveland was picked up by men on a lifeboat. So he was hit by the torpedo. He managed to cling to some overturned lifeboat. It was at night, so they're drifting at night and basically overnight until somebody comes in the next morning. So I can't even imagine how.
Yeah, just the horror. Yeah.
Yeah, just like waiting and hoping and like calling out to his mom, and his mom's hearing him. Somehow.
So this was like before Jaws, but do you think people were like still afraid of sharks back then, or would this have been like the Kraken? Like,
honestly,
what horrors
I think if I was in that
were people
situation,
afraid
sharks
of?
are probably the least of my concerns.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever like just look out at the ocean, like, you know, especially at night, it's just like one black abyss. So like that's pretty scary, even just looking at it.
A sea of burning oil too. So I'm imagining like that the ocean is literally on fire in some places. So it's like very apocalyptic to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it continues. The next morning, Cleveland was picked up by men on a lifeboat. The next 12 days, they drifted. Rations ran out, water was scarce, and there was no protection from the sun. Some men jumped overboard to be seen no more. Eventually, they landed on a small island in the vicinity of Devil's Island. Then they sailed on to Paramaribo and spent several days in a hospital before being transported back to the United States. In the meantime, back home in Goldsboro, Owen and Mary Ginn, his parents, had received words that their eldest son had died in the explosion. Grief swept over the entire family, and a funeral was planned and held. So he's presumed dead in this explosion, and there's enough time where he's in South America in the hospital where his family's convinced he's dead and holds his funeral. And then on Mother's Day in 1942, Grandma was in her bed. Granny, they call her Granny. Granny was in her bed, sick with the pain of loss. A taxi delivered Cleveland home to Chestnut Street, just ahead of the telegram announcing that he had been found and would be returned.
Wow.
The pictures taken that day were the ones I'd found in Aunt Evelyn's collection when they were reunited. Later that week, Cleveland spent some time with the Jarman family, telling them of Al's disappearance when the ship exploded. From that date forward, Mother's Day was celebrated in the Ginn family as the high holy day of the year. You may be excused for missing Christmas or Easter, but no matter where you were, you made it home to Goldsboro on the second Sunday in May. Let's see. I think, yeah, and then that explains why her mom was so disappointed for her missing her first Mother's Day in 1971. So yeah, that's the story that my cousin Linda Lee heard passed down to her, because she wasn't born yet when this happened.
Yeah.
So that's the first article. There's actually another one that goes into more detail from his actual recounting of what happened.
Oh, really?
So I can read that one too. It might have like some overlapping information, but
yeah. Definitely.
So I really love this first article because it's just like I can really picture my great grandma, who I've only seen in pictures, just like hearing some message, some voice in her head and just kneeling down and praying. So I think that's part of the reason why like religion runs so strongly in my family, because something like as amazing as this happened, they thought he was dead. She has this weird premonition that he's calling out for help, and she retains some hope, and then he shows up unannounced after his funeral before the announcement that he's been found. So
yeah, that's incredible.
Pretty shocking. Yeah.
That would be. Now, actually, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Now, did he know that they had assumed that he was dead? Like, did he have any knowledge or just kind of assume that or anything?
I'm not sure. But I hear that he was a really, like, quiet guy. When my dad knew him, he never talked about his time here, or they didn't really, like, make mention of what happened, but they did gather every Mother's Day to, like, and it was just kind of understood that that's, you know, what they were celebrating.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm sure they told him, though, when he arrived. I'm sure it was a huge, like, I thought you were dead.
Yeah, that would be like a huge shock, like to say the least. But
do you know if anyone else survived?
Yeah, it does say that there were 2 boats that survived, his and one other one.
Okay, sorry, I must have missed that.
So it said that, like, I think it actually is in the next article. I don't think you missed it, but yeah, so it said that the lifeboat that he was on, it just says some men jumped overboard, some died in the explosion. It was, I think, a very small number of them that survived this explosion.
Yeah.
okay. But yeah, I'm interested to hear what the next article said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Sorry, just taking some notes here.
So let's see. So this is a direct quote from him. It says, "The merchant marine won't quit. There was some dissatisfaction with the torpedoing of American tankers and freighters because the men didn't feel like they were being given adequate protection. All that can be given in view of the worldwide scope of the war. And the civilian sailors now are fighting mad. They will go back, every one of them, even those who have undergone the terrors of having their ships sunk and spending interminable days in heat and cold and nearly dying of thirst and starvation in open lifeboats." That was the opinion expressed Monday by Cleveland Ginn, 26, son of Mr. and Mrs. Owen Ginn. He arrived Sunday on a 30-day leave of absence. The standard oil tanker on which he worked was sunk in the Atlantic off of the northeastern coast of South America on March 31st. His shipmate, Al Jarman, son of Mrs. Rachel Jarman of Goldsboro, is believed to have been lost in the sinking. When the torpedo struck and the ship began settling, Ginn and Jarman were on the foredeck together, clad only in shorts in the fast-fading tropical sunset. "Well, we got into this together. We might as well die together," Ginn quotes Jarman as having said. That's our epic last words.
Yeah.
Their assigned lifeboat stations in event of emergency were different, but they headed for the same boat to starboard. Midway, however, Jarman became separated from him and was going aft towards his assigned lifeboat station. Ginn says a shell from the submarine hit the deck near his friend, and that was the last he saw of him. If Jarman
Wow.
wasn't killed by the shell's explosion, he must have died soon after in the sea, says Ginn. One other lifeboat is reported to have made land besides the one Ginn was in, but Jarman apparently wasn't in it. So, and then it says, this next section is called Reaches Devil's Island. So, the submarine had been following the tanker all day, with the tanker heading into the sun at full speed, Ginn said. Because of the sun, the sub waited until about 6:30 p.m. and then opened the attack. There were both shells and torpedoes. And his lifeboat was being lowered from the launch, a shell exploded between the hull of the ship and the lifeboat, tearing a hole in the lifeboat. A seaman grabbed the knife and cut the ropes. The lifeboat overturned in the sea. All that night they hung onto the keel of the capsized boat. At dawn, another lifeboat picked him up. They were hundreds of miles from land. There were 19 men in the boat, and the captain of the dead ship among them. For 11 days, they were carried by the wind and current toward the coast of South America. Their rations during these 11 days were 3 crackers and 3 ounces of water daily per man. A cracker and an ounce of water for each meal. Ginn doesn't like to talk about those 11 days. As to whether any of the men went mad, he won't say. He does say that there were 19 on the boat the morning after the sinking, and there were still 19 men aboard the 11th day when they hove in sight of Devil's Island, the famous penal colony in French Guiana. There were reefs and rocks and heavy seas. Night descended, and they saw a light blinking on one of the 3 islands which formed the group, but they couldn't be sure it wasn't an automatic light. They couldn't be sure there were men on the island or food or water. At any rate, they couldn't land because of the mountainous seas and reefs. They changed course, heading northwest. All that night they ran before a spankin' breeze. They made 40 miles. This wording is wild. They made 40 miles. They reached a spot where they thought they could land on a beach. They did land. Jumping out of the boat in the surf, they pulled it up on the beach. 19 sun-shrunken, emaciated, half-wild refugees from the mercilessness of a submarine's attack and the tempestuous ocean. Their drinking water had given out. Julian Morse from Murrells Inlet, South Carolina, was one of the group, and he knew how to get water. He had been raised among South Carolina's sea islands. About 100 years from the beach, he began digging in the sand with a piece of board, and the others helped him, scooping with their hands. When the hole was about waist deep, fresh water began to seep into it. They got 35 gallons of clean, pure, satisfying fresh water from the hole, says Ginn. The water only sharpened their pangs of hunger. A short time later, they saw a turtle on the beach, a huge sea turtle a couple feet in diameter, and they attacked it with pocket knives. They got the turtle's ugly head out and... unnecessary. They got the turtle's ugly head out and cut its throat with their knives. They carved into the shell and got the meat. They ate it, and they were sick. But some of the raw meat stayed on their stomachs. They set sail again that day. That day, they reached Paramaribo, Dutch Guiana. They were in the hospital there for 4 days. Ginn said he had lost 10 pounds. Wow. I haven't read that in a long time. That's crazy. So they arrive on this desert island. There's no one there, but they dig a hole for fresh water, find the fresh water, and then kill a massive sea turtle, eat the raw meat, were sick, and went on their way, and then landed somewhere with a hospital.
Wow.
And then I think this next section is more about like him after the fact. It says, he still is thin, and he looks a lot different, his friends say, from when he did when he left last November with Al Jarman, who probably had given his life to the vital materials of the war. Ginn doesn't talk easily. You have to ask him direct questions about anything you want to know, and he often won't answer, either because of something in himself or because the naval intelligence officers have told him not to talk about certain things. It can't be the instructions alone, though. The instructions don't cover what may have happened in the lifeboat during those 11 days. Ginn just prefers not to talk about them. When you ask him questions about what the men did, whether they prayed, the hallucinations they had, possibly about green trees and fresh, cool things to eat, a faraway, inscrutable expression comes into his eyes, and he just remains silent. those eyes have seen more than it's good for any one man to see. So
Wow.
yeah, so I think that's pretty much the rest is more of a commentary on the war. So
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. So, now obviously, so this is like your part of your family. So,
yeah.
what do you think? Like personally, do you think it was like some kind of like a like psychic like interlace that was kind of going on? So kind of like almost like uh what's that word? Telepathy, something like that, or like
Yeah. I think it's definitely possible. I mean, I never heard anything about this until this article came out and it was sent to me. It was
Really?
yeah, and I guess my dad is also a very private person. Like I think that kind of mentality just runs in the family. So you really do have to like dig if you want to know anything about their personal life.
Right.
And like my dad's the same way. Like he won't tell you. But yeah, they're all very secretive, and I do think that's a psychic kind of like interlace or like telepathy or something. I definitely think that's possible. I feel like I have a pretty strong like intuition and like sense of spirituality, even if I have like a little bit of skepticism as to what it is or like where it comes from. I think it's more fun even to just believe it.
Right.
And I think there's something to be said about the connection between like a mother and son, because obviously like she carried him for 9 months. It's her child, and she was so connected to her religion. I think she probably did tap into something, or he tapped into something, I think it's definitely possible that she heard his cry.
Yeah, that's really incredible because we were recording an episode last week, and it was kind of about phantom phone calls, and some of them were kind of like phone calls, some beyond the grave. Now one of them, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but in California there was a train wreck that happened, and I believe around 2008, 2006. And the story goes, it's like an actual news article. The son of this man, and I want to say it was like his fiance, they kept getting phone calls after, they heard about this metro train crash from his phone, but they just heard static, didn't hear his voice, nothing. Well, bottom line is it was like presumed that he had like expired long before any of those calls would have taken place, and his phone was like just gone. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of that, minus your was it your grandfather or great grandfather, great uncle. No,
Yeah.
so but, I mean, minus your great uncle made it home and he was safe, thankfully.
Yeah, but like maybe like having a near-death experience, or like an out-of-body experience at the very least. Like maybe there's some like astral projection kind of stuff going on.
Yes, something, because I mean, there's one theory, on ghosts and like spiritual stuff, is when you die, and especially in a traumatic event, you're just releasing a lot of like energy. So if you almost think of that almost like an aura, it almost like leaves an imprint,
right,
on that soil or the area. So I wouldn't think it'd be that hard to imagine, if you had like a near death experience. I mean, that's, gotta be traumatizing, especially if you didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
So
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally think that's possible, and that there's like, maybe another like dimension or another space that we go to afterwards, where if you have a near-death experience, maybe the lines are just a little bit more blurry than we think. And I think especially like having a science background, being trained in like biology and just being trained to be very like objective about it. I was always shocked when we were learning about things like how there's like 3 billion like bacteria that live in each of our bodies that each are considered to be alive in themselves. It's like if you were to zoom in and look at their life, they have no idea what's going on the outside of our bodies. And I think maybe the world kind of works like that we're all kind of part of something. There's, at the very least, it's proof that scale is relative and there are things that are just unobservable to our human senses. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's a lot more to like the spiritual world than we really know and understand about. And I mean, and I think with your family, you know, like you were saying how, you know, his mother had like a strong religious belief. So kind of like what you were saying, I definitely think that kind of helps it tie that in a little bit more. Now, now you were saying that you also studied psychology. Was that correct? So, were you kind of like skeptical, like at first, like of like ghosts or whatever, or maybe when you started studying psychology, did you kind of question like the reality of that at all, or?
Yeah, definitely. But ultimately, I think my belief and my like willingness to believe will always win out because I actually wanted to do psychology as my only major and like go and like be a counselor and do all that stuff, but what from my family, they were kind of leaning me more towards like, oh, go be a doctor, go, you know, do something that's really grounded. And I've always, I actually like dipped into psychology because I like thinking about like consciousness and what experts believe that is. And I found that psychology is really just like observational. Like it's just observing behavior. There's no like, they don't really get into like the esoteric like nature of it, and same with biology. Like it's very, very serious and very grounded.
Right.
So I always believed, even if I'm skeptic at times, I always come back to that belief. I mean, I've had like a couple just like weird experiences, even just like smoking weed that that are just like weird. Because weed doesn't really make you like hallucinate. And there have just been a couple of times where I've heard like music like coming from nowhere, but like all around me. And it just lasted for like a second, but it was so intense and so real. And I don't know where it came from. So I think there are certain things that you can use, or like whether it's drugs or like a deep like religious belief. I think there are things where if it just helps kind of open up something maybe in our brains that's just like usually closed.
Right, and you kind of tap into like a different reality. I mean, have you ever heard about like people seeing like the Hat Man, like when they do Benadryl? Like
no, I haven't heard it related to Benadryl.
Yeah, that's crazy. There's like a subreddit. I think it's
Benadryl. Like you have to do a lot of Benadryl.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like super, super dangerous. I mean, there's like people that, you know, they take, you know, 40 to 50, 60, 70 pills all at once.
Yeah.
But
it's like, why are they all seeing the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, because oh, go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, it could be that it's just that they hear about the Hat Man and so they have that image. But it does happen a lot. So maybe it is like, I kind of believe it's a real entity that you see when you take Benadryl. It's kind of like DMT when you hear about the machine elves on a consistent basis.
Right.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I'm definitely open to the existence of particular entities like that, but I also think I've listened a lot to the Bigfoot Collectors Club. I'm not sure if you're familiar with their podcast.
No, I don't think I am.
definitely check it out. It's awesome. They talk about like cryptids, aliens, consciousness, like any and all of these paranormal topics, and they've got like a 5-year backlog. And I feel like listening to all of their stories for the last 5 years, the recurring theme seems to be like whatever this paranormal like energy is, it's interacting with your brain. So like you said, if you're primed to see like a hat man, or if you've heard stories about seeing like a particular thing and that's what resonates with you, then that's what they're going to make you see, even if it's not necessarily what they objectively are. So
Right. Like they're kind of just tapping into your
yeah.
Right. Like what your perception of what they would be.
Or even like the collective consciousness of like what's happening in the media right now.
Yeah. Oh, I never even thought about that. But yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Now, so I actually had a quick question. When you said that you had that sleep paralysis, is that like a common thing that would happen like every now and again, or did you have like any like different experiences with sleep paralysis?
It seemed to be like a really specific time in my life when I was like a teenager, like 13 or 14, just like really like going through it, like being a depressed teenager. And
right.
Like, really giving into the like negative tendencies. That's when it started to happen, and I felt like it was like spiraling or like feeding off of it or something. So I think once I started to like be able to like get into a more like protective, like safe, like create a safe kind of energy within myself, then that's when it started to go away. But yeah, it was probably like a couple months that it would happen like a lot, like every night. And so yeah, I remember like I would stay on the phone with my boyfriend until like 3 or 4 in the morning because I didn't want to be alone and like couldn't fall. I was terrified to fall asleep. It was really scary.
Wow. So it was like really intense then. It wasn't just like
it was really cool.
Like a fear of sleep then. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I've had like a couple, like, I guess you could call them sleep paralysis kind of cases where, I remember, because like a little bit of background, I'm the second youngest of 5 siblings, and I had 2 older brothers and, 1 older sister. But you know how brothers are, they were, always like pranking each other and messing with each other. So, I remember one time I was asleep, and I don't know how best to describe it, but I was like mostly asleep, but I could almost like imagine what was going on, outside, of my eyes, if that makes sense. And I just felt like there was like a figure, like a presence, like someone standing over me. So I was like, I don't know, half asleep more or less. And I just kind of imagined that it was, one of my brothers, messing with me, trying to see if I was actually asleep.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, I just kind of felt like these 2 hands cross and then just put like weight on my chest. Like they're just leaning in. And all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe and I started choking. And then I actually started choking like in reality. I just couldn't get any air in. And I remember just kind of jumping up and like freaking out because I was like, what just happened?
Oh, that's so scary.
So yeah, and I want to say it was probably around the same time, I was, kind of going through it, and I was probably, I don't know, 16, 17, something like that. So, but I really think there is something to be said for your mindset, kind of like your emotions, kind of like, and, like negative entities, spirits, they really want to cling on to and feed off of that, like really, depressive, angry, energy. So it's like, I didn't really see like a whole lot of like paranormal like stuff in my life. I have seen like shadow figures out of the corner of my eye. I've heard things and stuff, and I think that my house is kind of, my parents' house actually is like, it has like some residual haunting because we have like a lot of items from, family member, friends of the family and stuff like that who have passed on.
Yeah.
But I always remember when I was like at a really all-time low, that's when like, you know, everything, all that activity would just like ramp up.
Totally.
So
Yeah. And
yeah,
I
no,
think even like being around people who are consistently like negative and angry, I think you can
mhm.
feel it when you walk into their space.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like you kind of like feel that energy.
Yeah.
Sorry, Luke, you're gonna say something?
Just nodding in agreement.
Yeah, because
So
everybody talks about like vibes and like good vibes and stuff like that, but I think that there's actually something to it. Like it's a popular saying for a reason. We don't really think about what that means.
yeah, yeah, and um, we did an interview a while back with the New Reality, and Sean from the New Reality. He's like a psychic medium, and we asked him the question like, was everyone kind of psychic? How does that work? And he had like the coolest analogy because he said it's like how everyone can draw. Some people just draw stick figures, and some people can do really complex
Right.
paintings. He said everyone has like a little bit of something.
Hmm.
So like I 100% like agree with that. Um,
Yeah.
Now I don't know. Maybe it's just like if you have some kind of like trauma or something that triggers it early on. You know, maybe
Yeah.
that activates it. I don't really know.
Potentially. I think for me, like I was an only child growing up and I had working divorced parents, so I spent a lot of time by myself, like playing by myself. I'm sure that I had imaginary friends. I can even remember like making one up. I don't think it was real, but then it was
Uh huh.
like the more that we talked about it, it's like, is she becoming like, are we manifesting this
Right.
imaginary friend? But I think like there's just like a lot of magic and imagination, and I really like dipped into that a lot as a kid, and I
Hmm.
really like to try to retain that as an adult because I think it does open you up to more of these things, and hopefully like in a positive way.
Yeah. Right. Right. And there is, I can't remember the exact word, but there is a Greek word, I believe. Um, and basically, what the word was, it basically meant that if you believe in something long enough, you almost kind of wish it into existence.
Hmm.
And I heard that was used as an example for like, you know, Slender Man. Like everyone said, oh yeah, it's a
Yeah.
creepypasta. Started on, you know, Reddit, 4chan, and all that. But then you hear people, you know, claiming to have actually seen, you know, the Hat Man, or at least really believing that they had seen the Hat Man. So I
Hmm.
wish I could remember that word, but it basically just kind of meant that if you believe in something long enough, you almost like will it.
Yeah, I think that's totally true because so the reason that I haven't done music like publicly until this past year is because I had such like terrible social anxiety and got made fun of
Hmm.
for like being, writing songs in class as a kid. I was, yeah, it's
Hmm.
not a great idea. But just like, I was like, oh, so songwriting is lame and so I
Hmm.
shouldn't, this is what I know to be true about myself. And it wasn't until I like got in therapy a year ago and started like unpacking some of those beliefs, or was like, no, like writing songs is actually a way that I process what's going on, and it's really
Hmm.
helpful. And music has literally saved my life at times. So as soon as I changed what I knew to be true, it was a lot easier for me to finish my songs and get stuff out there. And it's really been nothing but like positivity, like positive responses to it so far. So I think
That's great.
the more you practice what you know about yourself and like really examine that and be honest with yourself, I think you can start creating the life that you really want.
Yeah, absolutely. And go ahead, Luke.
Like a little thought can make a decision permanent. Luckily for
Yeah.
you, it wasn't permanent. It was just years. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's wild how you can just manifest yourself. Or I don't know if manifest is the right word, but you can just talk yourself out of doing
Right.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I relate to that. I think it's kind of like common, I guess, because I don't know, like at least in my personal experience, like a lot of musicians that I know and that I've met tend to be kind of like, you know, empathetic. So I feel like if you attack, you know, their their music or, you know, criticize them, I mean, obviously you criticize anyone. Most people aren't going to take it too well. I mean, even if you do, it still, you know, stings a little bit. But since that's someone's like creation, you know, that's something that they, you know, made, you know, it kind of hurts all that much more. So,
Yep.
no, I definitely relate to that. I kind of, you know, started to work myself back into music a few years ago as well. So this is kind of like that fear of, you're never going to actually go anywhere with it. You're never going to make
Right.
it, you know?
Yeah, and then like if you take that one step further, it's like, well, okay, so what if I don't make it, and what if everything I make sucks? It's like, well, I'm still cool, and I still I still exist, and I still can
Yeah.
make music regardless. So it's like
Yeah.
knowing that you have knowing who you are. It doesn't affect you as much.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you have to go past the surface level. You're not just, you know, a musician. You're not just a, you know, paranormal investigator or whatever. It's really root bound, you know, who you are as a person, like on a spiritual level. So, yeah, that's incredible.
So I actually remembered another story that I have, if you guys have time.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Totally.
So, talking about like being like really emotionally connected and like empathetic, something that I always kind of take for granted that this happens to me, but like I have really vivid dreams, and I always have my whole life. Like I remember a really good portion of my dreams, and they're always like kind of nonsensical, but like they kind of fall into different like types of dreams. There's the like abstract like dream that's just probably me processing what's going on. And then there are a couple like dreams that I've had that have been visitations from people that have passed away. So the first one that I had was actually a dream about my dog. I don't know if you guys believe that like dogs, like, you know, when I was growing up, it was like dogs don't go to heaven, like they're just dogs.
Yeah.
but
No, I totally do.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they're a lot more like aware of what's happening than we give them credit for. But yeah, so like my dog, like being an only child, like my dog was like my best friend growing up, and I had him he's a standard poodle. His name is Buddy, and I had him from age like 5 to age like 19. He lived a really long time. So,
Wow.
so after he passed away, I wasn't able to go home. I was at college. I wasn't able to go home when they had to put him down. But I had this dream probably like a month or two later where it was like, it's so vivid where he's a puppy and he's like in my backyard and he like jumps into my arms and I'm like, Buddy, I missed you so much. Like I knew in the dream that he was gone. So, and it really felt like he was there. And I've had dreams like that specifically with that dog probably 2 or 3 times. And it hasn't happened in a long time because I've, you know, made peace with it and everything. So I don't know, maybe they do come through in dreams. But then the second time this happened was, so I had this friend, Lizzie, in high school, and she had a cousin who was like 9 or 10 years old that got diagnosed with a glioblastoma, which is a really aggressive brain tumor. And
wow.
Yeah, so she lived for, I think, like maybe 2 or 3 years with that diagnosis before she passed away. And before she passed away, she was able to do all the like Make-A-Wish stuff. Her dream was like to be a rock star, and she got to like go sing on stage. She got to meet the president. And she did all this really cool stuff and like made the news a bunch of times and like had a really big impact on people. But it was really, really hard for her family when she passed away, of course. And so I just, it was a couple days after she had passed away, I had this crazy dream where so I wonder if I could actually find the note because I wrote it down. Okay, but basically the gist is I was sitting in my dream. I'm sitting at this like old school computer. I'm like typing I'm scrolling through like social media or something, and then all of a sudden this hand comes out of the screen of the computer, grabs my hand, pulls me into the computer screen, and then I'm like in this like blue like river of like light or like water, I guess. I don't know, but this hand is still like holding mine and like guiding me along, and I felt very like safe and like pure. And I look at my hand, and it's Olivia's hand, the little girl. It's like a little girl, chubby little hand with blue nail polish on. Her favorite color was blue. And so it's like my hand is her hand, and there's this like benevolent person guiding me through this river. And it's just like the best feeling in the whole world. I'm like, I'm safe, like I'm okay, I'm protected. And then we pull up, like the hand pulls me to the surface of this water, and I see Lizzie, my friend, who's like happy on the beach, and I see like a bunch of like musicians, like famous people, and all dressed in white. Like everybody's dressed in white. And it just like was a sense of like, I'm here, I'm okay, like tell my family. And so then I wrote everything down when I woke up, and I sent it to Lizzie, my friend, and she was like, come over right now. So I went over to her house, and then we sat down and we wrote a song for Olivia.
Wow.
And and so I'm gonna actually release that song at some point here in the next year or two. But that's awesome. It was just crazy. That's the craziest dream I've ever had, because it was like, it was me, but it was her. It was like she was taking me into her perspective and like telling me that she was okay.
Kind of seeing things like through her eyes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that was I've never had anything like that again. And then you were also talking. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, you're fine. Go ahead.
I was just gonna move on to another one that I remembered, where you were saying that you would hear things sometimes. When I was at work a couple years ago, I worked at a school for kids with autism, and so it was really loud in that school all the time. You really don't hear a loud crash. Like you're like, okay, some kid knocked over a bookshelf, and that's just today.
Right.
But where my office was seated, it was like kind of in a corner that was away from the classrooms. There wasn't a lot going on. It was me in this corner office, and then right next door was the senior director of the school. And she works alone in her office. I was alone it was me and my coworker in our shared office. And we just all of a sudden hear this huge crash. Like it sounded like a bookshelf, like a 7-foot tall bookshelf full of like glass and plates, like was knocked over, and like and it was the biggest like crash I'd ever heard in the school. So of course we go out into the hallway. We're in a corner, so it's just like the offices in the hallway are the only things that are there. There's nothing there. The senior director comes out of her office, does the same thing, like, what is that? Are you guys okay? And we could not find anything that had fallen anywhere in the school. So
this is kind of like this phantom crash.
Yeah, it was. It was crazy.
That's really interesting, because I thought you were gonna say maybe there's a bookshelf that's knocked over, but no one was around it, or
nothing.
And multiple people.
Yeah,
hearing the same thing.
Yeah.
But, then she was like, I have to go call some parents. Like, well, we're moving on. So nobody else really lingered on it as I did, but...
Yeah, I was baffled. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would definitely be like something that'd be like a little creepy. Yeah. Especially if you weren't expecting it.
Yeah, and I always like looked around for something else to happen while I was there. I worked there for 3 years. I was often there like after school when kids weren't there. I always thought there would be like a swing that would swing, or like a ball that would roll or something, but there was nothing other than that crash.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Now, like, I've heard. Was there any like other paranormal things that happened there? Like, that anyone else of like said anything, or was it like was that the only thing?
No, that's pretty
That's
much the
weird.
only thing. But I do know
Yeah.
that at one of our other school locations
Mhm.
in rural Ohio has a handprint on the wall, like a little kid handprint that they've
Oh,
tried to
wow.
paint over several times, and the handprint keeps coming back. So I never saw it in person,
Wow.
but I've seen
Uh-huh.
a picture of it.
That's cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Might have to check that out.
Wow.
So when you say you have like high intuition, like, have you ever had any experiences where you saw a future event kind of like unfold?
Actually, just recently, I had a dream about a baby boy that I like pulled out of the crib and held, and that was the same morning that my sister-in-law went into labor and had a baby boy.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah.
that's crazy.
So that's cool. So I mean, I don't know enough, about like a lot of psychic stuff to really, to make a good observation. But it kind of sounds like your intuitions are like kind of dream based. Then
Yeah, definitely.
that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I kind of have like those things where it's like almost kind of like deja vu, but almost not. It's like
Yeah.
the perfect scenario, like you're doing a particular task. Maybe you're like moving something in and out of the car, and somebody says something, the light's just shining a perfect way, and it's like triggers like a memory. Like
Yeah.
I have that, sometimes where it's just
I've had those too. Recently, I had one where I played in this Blondie cover band, which was really
oh, that's
fun.
cool. Yeah.
It was like a one night only thing where we learned 11 Blondie songs and then performed it on Halloween for the Halloween show.
Okay.
And
That's cool.
we were in our first rehearsal, and I was really nervous because I'd never been in a band before. I was playing keys, and I was kind of just like hanging on for dear life. And then it's something like clicked where we were in the middle of a song, and I was playing, and I was like, I have been here before. I've been in this basement before with these people that I've never met. I've never been here in my life, but I know that this has happened.
Yeah.
I've definitely had those feelings. I hear that in the brain, it's like it's when you store memories, there's like working memory that lasts for just like a few seconds, and then there's like short-term memory, which is like a little bit longer, and then long-term memory lasts forever. And I hear that deja vu is like when you have an experience and something happens in the wiring process where it skips over short-term memory and goes straight to wherever long-term memories are stored. So it feels like it's something that's already happened. But whenever I hear these like scientific explanations for these things, like sleep paralysis, they say it's your brain like not getting enough oxygen or whatever. But I think both things can be true. Like, I think that there can be a scientific explanation in the body, but also that maybe something spiritual is going on as well. And they're both kind of like coexisting. They're both two sides.
Yeah, kind of like simultaneous. Yeah. Yeah, no, I've never actually heard a explanation, like a scientific explanation for deja vu. So that was interesting because I've always kind of wondered that. But I don't know, like, I remember one time I was standing in line. I don't remember where I was at. I think this is like COVID times. So, everyone was like lining up outside of stores, I think. And there was these two people that were talking, I don't know, maybe 4, 5, 6 people ahead of me. And they're having a conversation. There's this older gentleman. He's talking to like these teenage kids. And he was, saying that he grew up, in that little town that we were in. And he said, I grew up in this house that my parents owned. And I don't know, it's something in my head was just kind of like, I know he's going to say he had like a white picket fence with like a garage, off to the side, like not attached to the house. I don't know why, but I just kind of thought that. And as soon as he finished his sentence, he's like, there's a white picket fence and the garage, wasn't attached to the house, and that's, where my dad kept his motorcycle, or something like that. And I just remember thinking, like, that was, like, too weird.
Yeah, totally. That sounds like kind of like
Yeah.
remote viewing a little bit.
Yeah, like, um, and that's funny you mentioned that, because I wish I could remember her name, but there was a lady that was part of the whole remote viewing project, with the CIA, in the Cold War, era. There's a lady I met not too long ago. It was a couple months ago, and she had claimed that her mother-in-law was actually involved in that CIA program.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really interesting. She's a really, really cool lady. It was actually at a antique store, right? And kind of like around like the LA area. Like she was selling like crystals and crystal balls and things, and we kind of were talking about different, just kind of like we're doing now. It's like different paranormal concepts and different things, and then she just kind of mentioned that, and it was like super like out of the blue. And there's one guy years ago, he was talking to my younger brother and I, and then I don't even remember what we were talking about, but just mid conversation, he said like July 17th, 19th, or 26th, or something like that. He's like, which one's your birthday? Well, my little brother's birthday is July 19th.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like super weird, just out of the blue, like mid conversation, he just kind of like interrupted himself. So it was kind of like, that was like a little odd.
Yeah,
but
totally.
So, yeah, I think, needless to say, there's this kind of like a certain like spiritual, aspect, like supernatural part of the world that I think that either most people choose to ignore, or maybe they're just too busy to notice. Because, I mean, if you look back at history, it seems like everyone was a little bit more, I don't want to say in tuned, but, I guess more superstitious,
Yeah, totally. And everything depends on like the tides and like, you're navigating by like literal stars. Like I would
exactly
be superstitious as well.
Yeah, and I don't know, I almost feel like with technology, it almost seems like you're kind of being blindsided, you're not really, I guess, noticing all the supernatural stuff that's happening around you. But, or I don't know, or maybe it's decreased. I don't know, but
I think like it's
the nice thing about it is like this, like we're kind of exposing it with technology.
Yeah, exactly.
You could use it for either way. Like you could doom scroll for 4 hours, like I'm tend to do sometimes, but then other times like I'll be like, okay, algorithm, like show me what I need to hear right now, and then it has some super like inspirational message as the first thing, and I'll just close the app. Like I think it's a tool to use like tarot cards or like anything else like that.
Wow. No, sorry, Kenny. I thought you were going to say something. Was that what you were going to say right before that, or?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. But
I had a question about the Ouija board thing. So, like, do you have any scenarios that were scary, or just any that stood out to you that you wanted to share?
Yeah, the one that really convinced me was it was me and my best friend at the time, Erin. She was 2 years older than me, but we like met playing softball together and just like we're best friends for years. So like we had a really strong connection, and her grandpa had passed away, and we were using the Ouija board, and she had asked for confirmation. She was like, what? I don't even remember what the question was. It was something having to do with like what kind of jewelry she inherited, or like where this piece of jewelry was, or something like that. And it just gave the answer that she was looking for. And just she like the look in her eyes when she looked at me, it was like she did not expect that to happen. We hugged, and like it was really, she like cried. It was really emotional for her to hear from her grandpa. So that was that. I like. After that experience, I was like, how do you not want to do this all the time? Like, this is so cool. And on the other side of that, I was doing it with, it was my friend Juliet and her cousin. So it's like 3 or 4 like teenage girls doing this Ouija board, and we were like, okay, who are you? And it was giving us like kind of partial answers, but what we could make out was that they died on a G6, and then the only other thing that they would say is that Juliet was cute. It would just be like cutie, cutie, cutie.
Oh.
And after that, she was like, no way, we're never doing this again. So she felt very creeped out by it. And then other times I've just used it for like neutral, like entertainment. That's all that I would do now, is be like, if I were to use it, I still have it because it's like, I can't throw it away. But I don't necessarily want to be like chatting with ghosts all the time. But my nephew, he just turned 18, but when he was when he was younger, he was really interested in it, and so I got it back out and like taught him how to like do like protect yourself energetically. And then we just asked questions about like, okay, like where are we now? Where am I going to live in 10 years? Am I going to marry this person? Like kind of like a question and answer type thing.
Almost like the magic 8 ball, you ask a question, shake it around. Yeah. Wow. Now I've never like used like a Ouija board, like obviously, but I've heard like some people say like if you don't take like the precaution, or if you don't like say goodbye at the end, like that can like just leave that kind of level or that chord of communication open. Like, have you ever had anything like that happen, or were you always like making sure you kind of close the door, if you will, at the end?
Retrospectively, like that was around the same time that I had that sleep paralysis stuff happen. So maybe there's a connection, but I was pretty diligent about it. We would say like a prayer or something beforehand. We would light these candles. We would flip it. You flip the planchette over and you say thank you and goodbye. So I was pretty pretty religious about doing that. But some of my friends weren't. So
yeah. Well. No, because have you used dowsing rods like at all before?
No, but they seem really cool.
Yeah, I remember I picked up a used pair. I think it was like on Macari or something, earlier in the year. And I was, asking, some different people, about using them, and, what does it mean if they do this, or, if they cross or they keep spinning? Well, usually, you ask them to be open or, close. Well, every time I pulled out one, in my house, it just would take off like a helicopter. And it was like the strangest feeling ever, because I can't think of what the toy was called, but did you ever play like those like sound makers? It was like a little kind of like a spherical thing attached to like a string. You spin it in the air. No, it's not a spherical thing. It's like a piece of wood, I think, and you spin it in the air and it makes like sound.
Yeah.
And you kind of feel that momentum spinning. That's what it felt like, because you could feel like the momentum, like almost like a magnetism thing, kind of pulling it, but it was just like spinning in circles. Yeah, so that was like really
with no there's no explanation for that.
Yeah, that was. I mean, like every now and again, sometimes they might kind of just tweak just a little bit. It's like, okay, maybe that was just my arm twitching, but to like spin around like that was
right.
that was interesting.
Yeah, I've tried to use a pendulum before, and I don't know if I'm like too impatient for it, but it would either like not happen, or I would be like, well, I'm moving it. So yeah, it's never worked for me. Yeah,
I haven't used a pendulum, but the interesting thing is my cat, he hates the dowsing rods. Whenever I pull them out, he just smack them right out of my hand. So, I mean, and I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying before about, seeing like your dog, because I've always heard that, animals are kind of like a little bit more in tune to like, the spirit world. And in different like cultures, they always have the the Vikings, when they had their Viking funeral, they had their dog with them because they believed that the dog would escort them to the afterlife.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of different, cultures that believe that. So I've heard stories about people that were at a haunted location or their house or something, and their dog starts growling at something that's, seemingly not even there, or the same thing with the cat. So I almost like to think that, whatever I was doing was, making my cat freak out or see stuff. So he's like, "Oh, get that out of my face."
Yeah.
Get that out.
Maybe there was something attached to those dowsing rods.
Yeah. And actually, I had never even considered that, because I don't know who used them beforehand. So
Yeah, I love antiques like for that reason, because they like each item like belonged to somebody, for multiple people probably, just like changing hands.
Yeah.
I think that there's definitely some kind of energy that maybe gets transferred.
Yeah, no, you actually just triggered a memory. When I was a teenager, like in my late teens, one summer I was working over at this house that was it wasn't abandoned, but it was vacant, and the lady who had owned the house, she was an older lady, and I think she fell and she got hurt or something, so she wound up moving to like an assisted living home. So the house was just kind of dormant. There's no one there. So I got hired to, cut the weeds down and, that kind of stuff and get it ready for them to sell. Well, she had previously worked at a thrift shop, so she had a ton of antiques. And I remember every time you go into the hallway to use the bathroom, you just kind of have like a weird, ominous kind of like, I don't want to say like a dark feeling, but
Yeah.
you felt like there was like someone watching you, like mind your cues, because there's someone looking at you, kind of thing. And I remember in this one particular time, it was October, so the days were shorter, and I was moving a lot of like firewood or something outside, and I was listening to different like ghost stories, true horror stories and those kind of things. While I was doing my work to keep busy, the sun starts to go down. And have you ever heard the Annalise Michel tapes? Have you heard those? So it was an exorcism. It's actually based off of The Exorcist of Emily Rose, excuse me, is based off of, this exorcism case.
Gotcha.
Well, and if you ever hear the actual like recordings from the exorcism, it's like the most like chilling voice you've ever heard in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, years ago when I was little, my older siblings were messing with me, so they played it just to freak me out. So, and I remember, I hadn't heard him since then. And, I'm working, it's starting to get dark, and I just hear this like, blood curdling voice. And I'm just like, okay. And, I feel like a chill run down my spine. I'm reaching for my phone to change it. But I knew that place was kind of haunted because, like, in different scenarios, there's like a lacy curtain, because the backyard, they had like a bedroom kind of facing that way. And there's like these lacy curtains. And every now and again, like, you'd kind of see the curtain like peer back a little bit, like as if someone had their hand there and, let go. But there's no one in the house. Like, so that wouldn't even be possible, because you can still see the curtain like dangling and swinging a little bit. So I don't know. I just had this feeling. I was like, you know what? I can't change this, because if I change this, I'm gonna like show these ghosts or entities or whatever that I'm scared. So I was like, no, it's time to show these ghosts who's boss. So I forced myself to listen to like the whole, 1 hour, hour and a half thing. So needless to say, like afterwards, like I was just kind of like a little numb, but
Yeah,
just like,
I think that is probably the right move, though, is to like, I think that's a way of like protecting yourself.
Yeah, yeah, in a weird sort of way, it's like, asserting my dominance.
Yeah, right.
In a sense.
No, I've watched a lot of ghost hunting shows, and my favorite one is Kindred Spirits, because
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
also Ghost Brothers is really fun too. But Kindred Spirits, I
Yeah.
think, is a lot different from the other ghost hunting shows because they're not really like looking for just like reactions. They're not just trying to get reactions out of the ghosts. They're like looking into the history of the home. And I think there was one episode where they
Mhm.
even like they found mold in the attic, and like the ghost was trying to like keep them out of the attic maybe, or like let them know that it was there, and they had like a newborn that was about to move into like a moldy house. So
Yeah.
it's really incredible what they can tap into, but like sometimes they'll come across negative entities that like don't really have a story
Mhm.
and just kind of want to mess with people. And the way it seems like the way that they always resolve it is by like asserting your dominance over your space and like this is my space. You can't be here if you're gonna do these things, and I'm not gonna let you back.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, I think I vaguely remember that episode or one similar to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is interesting, and I did a it was kind of like a ghost hunt thing in San Francisco. It was like a group thing, and they kind of said the same thing. And it was in Chinatown, San Francisco. And at the end of the ghost hunt, you had like poppets, like those little like things you throw on the ground, they explode,
Mm-hmm.
and you threw those down, and it kind of went to like if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was like Chinese culture or like beliefs that if you used a loud noise, that would like kind of scare the
Yeah.
spirits away,
I've heard
or like
that.
banging on a drum or something. Yeah, so you kind of threw these like poppets down at the end, which was kind of
That's
fun.
cool.
But
Yeah, I've heard in my family,
Yeah.
actually, my grandma Evelyn, who is the daughter, or I guess she would be the sister of Cleveland Ginn, who was in this explosion. She always liked to collect bells.
Oh,
And
okay.
she would ring bells as a way of like energetic clearing, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I've heard about that. Like using like those little chimes.
Hmm.
Yeah, like have you ever seen like the Conjuring like movies?
No, I've only recently like worked up the nerve to start watching scary movies again. They're too scary.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't spoil them because you watch them, but there's one scene in one of the movies. I think it's Annabelle Comes Home, and like the Warrens, like they had their it started off as a room just from their different items in their investigations, and it kind of became like a sort of like an occult museum.
Right.
But one of the items that they had were like these death chimes, I think. I think it was kind of used as like a cleansing thing. But yeah, it's kind of what it reminds me of because there's one scene in the movie, it starts like ringing in the background.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so there's definitely a spiritual connection between music and the supernatural.
Yeah, totally. I think it kind of comes back to like waves, like literal energy. Like I remember learning about this in physics in college, where it was like it's called the double slit experiment. It's when they proved that light. I think it's that I'm gonna totally butcher the scientific explanation, but I think it's that energy can exist as a particle and a wave. Or like it can be either state, so it can either be solid or it can be a wave. And I think like have you ever seen those videos of somebody playing like a frequency and there's sand on top of the speaker? And
Oh yeah.
yeah, and it actually like if you play a certain frequency, the sand will like the vibrations will arrange the sand to form like patterns.
Yeah, like different like geometric
Yeah, if you
shapes,
haven't-
right?
Look it up. It's I don't even know how you would find
Yeah,
it.
I will.
But it's really cool. So yeah, I think there's definitely something to like sound as a wave interacting with matter in it's kind of like this alchemical like process that kind of you can't really break it down into parts. It just has an effect on you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. because like like people use different like frequency hums or like droning sounds like for meditation and stuff.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and like in ancient practices, they've used sounds for thousands of years. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I want to say it was King Tut. I think he was buried with like a flute or something,
oh, that's cool.
because they kind of believe that, it was actually really interesting because I don't remember, all that he was buried with. But I want to say it was like a flute or some kind of like a musical instrument and some other items, because they believed that he would need those tools to carry on like in the afterlife.
Right.
So yeah, that was like really interesting.
Yeah.
It just goes back, millennia.
Mhm. Yeah. For sure.
Were you guys about ready to wrap this up?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think we're good. Do you have
those are all of my stories? I think the only one that I may have missed is my grandpa coming through as a whistle. So like I don't know
That's pretty cool.
I was home alone one night. I was making dinner and I was frying bacon on the stove, and in my short-sighted mind, I was like, I can multitask. I'm gonna go play music while this bacon is cooking on the stove. And I can sing, but I can't whistle. Like I just can't.
Oh, okay.
I've tried my whole life and I can't do it. And for whatever reason, I was playing music and I did this. I started whistling, and it was like a clear, crisp whistle that I literally cannot replicate. That sounded like a siren. And that moment made me be like, oh my god, this bacon is definitely like burning in the kitchen, and there's maybe a grease fire happening. So I went into the kitchen, and it was thankfully like perfectly cooked bacon, but like any longer and it would have been a bad situation. Don't leave your don't fry items unattended, guys. It's not good.
Yeah.
But my grandpa was actually a fireman in his life. He did that. He did it his whole life, and he was very like strict about fire and fire safety and stuff in the home. And he had just died in the pandemic, so I didn't get to say goodbye to him or anything. He had passed away in the pandemic, and this was probably like 2 or 3 months after he passed away. He had a good long full life, and so. But so I think that was him coming through and being like, go pay attention, and it was just crazy to have a sound come out of my mouth that I literally can't make. So
that's really powerful. And real quick, there's like a little story that's kind of similar to that. But Luke and I, we also grew up Catholic and raised Catholic. We actually used to be altar boys together.
Nice. I would have if
and
let me.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, yeah. We had a couple girls at our church that were altar servers because we were such a small parish. Yeah, we didn't, and a lot of the boys, they didn't want to altar serve. So
fair enough.
But over at our church, I met this elderly gentleman, and he became my guitar teacher. Really sweet guy. He had like a long white beard, kind of like Santa Claus. Really cool. He's played like a lot of Celtic like style music. So I was kind of like classically trained originally when I was learning guitar. And I remember he passed away when I was about 17. He had like a lot of like trouble with his lungs, and he was on oxygen for a long time. And I remember I was working at his house, with some other people, his godson, and we were working over there to try in preparation to have him move back. And then, he passed away later on, that summer. Anyway, we were still working on the house, for his wife. And it was, All Souls Day, in November. And I remember no one was at the house. All the other workers left, and I was by myself, and I was digging a trench, I think for some pipeline or something, and all the dust, kicked up and made me sneeze. And then I heard someone say, "Bless you," in his voice. Without thinking, I'm like, "Oh, thank you." And then I thought, wait, there's no one else here.
Oh my God.
He passed away over the summer. What just happened?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that was just like same kind of thing. I did visit him like a month or two prior to his passing, but again, I never actually got to have a formal goodbye. So in my mind, that's almost like him just kind of popping by and just
Yeah.
making sure everything was okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you guys sharing your stories. It's really fun to have like a space to talk about all this wild stuff you don't get to talk about in your daily life. So thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for being on, and we'd love to have you on again at some point. And maybe we can even discuss like some of like your music stuff as well.
Cool. Yeah.
I did have a question because I heard your song you put out last night. Or I listened to it last night. Do you have like Tom Petty influences, or
I have
was that just my interpretation?
I have indirect Tom Petty influences. My biggest influence is somebody named Connor Oberst. He's the lead singer.
Yes, yeah,
Guys.
yeah.
I listened to
like this is the first day of my life. Yeah.
I listened to all his. I went to all his concerts. It was yeah, and I think Tom Petty was a big influence for him. So, but I appreciate that. That's a huge compliment.
Cool. Like second-hand Tom Petty. Did you play the harmonica?
Yes, I did.
Was that you? Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I spent
well,
like,
definitely thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.
Oh, sorry to cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say I spent a couple of days when I was a kid just like really learning the harmonica because I thought it would come in handy one day, and here we are. So.
Yeah. Well, evidently it did. So that's awesome. And thank you for being on. We appreciate it, and we'd love to have you on again sometime if you run into any more paranormal encounters, or
sounds good.
if you want to talk about if you just want to talk about your music, because I kind of want to dive into that more. And who knows, maybe the three of us can all collab one day. That would be cool.
Great. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Alrighty, sounds good. Thank you for being on. And thank you guys for tuning in to this week's episode of The Afterlife, where we got to interview Kennedy Hall. And Kennedy, where can our viewers find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at KennedyHallMusic on everything, or KennedyHallMusic.com.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to hearing the rest of your music and your album as it releases, and keep us posted. And as always, we'll see you guys on the other side.